Right, everyone. Laura,
Right.
I'll let you take it away.
Thank you so much. Thank you for your help, Rebecca. So I'm Laura Murray, and as you see on the slide here, I'm going to share some lessons learned from an online course for graduate students. Before I do that, I'll quickly introduce myself. Again, my name is Laura. I'm an educational psychologist by training and spent many years situated at Princeton University's Center for Teaching and Learning, leading a program to support all of that university's graduate students to learn and thrive. I should also say that my wonderful colleague, Dr. Kate Thorpe, who is supposed to present with me this morning, is unable to. She apologizes, but she had a medical situation in her family that she had to address. So Kate and I worked together for many years at the McGraw Center for Teaching and Learning at Princeton. And after doing that, we decided to take some of the lessons that we had learned in programming that we had piloted and developed there and see if we could adapt it and make some of those resources available to graduate students across institutions. So that's kind of what we'll be talking about today. And also because we're a very small group, I invite you to take take yourselves off mute if and when you like. We will do some activities, and I'm hoping that you're willing to engage in that. I'm happy to see your faces as well, but no pressure at all. Whatever is most comfortable for you. Okay, so in an effort to get to know each other a little bit, I wondered if you could just quickly write in the chat who you are and where you're zooming in from today, so I have a sense of who's here. Sean, great. And Rebecca, great. And we'll see if Amanda and Marina, oh, great. See you, Boulder, Boulder, Boulder. Okay. And Lafayette and Ames Community College. Great. Okay. So I'm not in Colorado. I'm on the East Coast in Bucks County, Pennsylvania, which is right on the Delaware River on the border between Pennsylvania and New Jersey. So hello. All right. Um, so um, what we wanted to share here is that we often start the workshops that we do and have historically done with grad students with some sort of a welcome or icebreaker. So I thought I would invite you to participate in one of these as well. We find, and research supports this, that even small occasions where students can get together and share a little bit about themselves beyond what's happening in the classroom or in their programmatic cohort, it can be really useful to support community building, which we'll talk more about in a moment. So similarly, I have this follow-up question. What interests you about this workshop? Or if this is more relevant, what's your experience working with graduate students, if you do, or if you've been one? And feel free to unmute yourselves or again to respond in the chat if you like.
I'll get us started.
Oh, great. Thank you.
Yep, absolutely. I was a graduate student and I mentor graduate students through my professional organization at ECT and ELK. I adjunct teach for Baker University.
Great.
And yeah, so this workshop interests me, even though I'm the moderator. I actually picked it
Thank
because
you.
I absolutely I feel that I felt the purpose behind this, that holistic approach that we need to have for students and how we work with them in their journey, because this is a journey. And it always feels like they're just trying to get to the end goal. And it's like, yeah, but there's a process within that. And you just have to follow those loops and go. So yeah, I have a barking dog. I apologize.
That's okay. I have a sleeping dog underneath my desk who might wake up at any moment. Thank you, Rebecca. Marina or Amanda? Oh, Amanda, I see you're writing in the chat. I work with 2 asynchronous master's programs as an instructional designer. Great. Been a graduate student. Wonderful. Interested in humanizing Humanize and holistic learning design. Wonderful. Thank you. And Marina says, I was interested in this workshop because of the focus on graduate students. Wonderful. Okay, so we're in the right place. Thank you. All right. So here are some learning goals. We'll see how we do with these today. But our hope and again, when I say our, Kate and I developed this together. Our hope is that at the end of our time together today, although it will be brief, you've been able to consider some of the distinctive needs of graduate students. So how are their needs and experiences and strengths different and distinct from undergrads? I will explore some approaches to meeting some of those needs and what we've learned from some of our interventions. And we'll reflect on supports for grad students potentially in your work at your institutions. And if you are, working at a college that doesn't serve graduate students, that's absolutely fine. You can share some of the supports at your institution for undergrads, or think about your own experience as graduate students. And then we'll do a little activity to give you a sense of one of the activities that we do with students in the course that we created that I'll describe. And then finally, at the end of the hour, we hope that you'll be able to articulate one action step, and it can be a small one, or a future goal to support graduate students at your institution, or potentially graduate students that you may be working with in the future. Okay. All right, so here's a little roadmap. First, I'll talk a little bit about thriving, with this idea of well-being, thriving, and flourishing, which undergirds our work and informs the example of the course that we created, and I'll share with you. And then we'll think about, whether you work with graduate students, what supports, again, might exist at your institution. And then I'll describe how Kate and I launched a new initiative called GradTLC, which stands for Graduate Thriving and Learning Connection. And then I'll share some pieces of one example of one of the resources we developed under the GradTLC umbrella. This is the online course that we piloted called Gateway to Grad School, meant as a tool to help students transition into graduate education. We'll do a little activity, which we call the Grad Student Wheel of Life, and then we can do a little debrief, and I would love to hear your thoughts and questions. Okay, so first we're going to back up a little bit. So I said I'm a psychologist by training. I went to the Graduate School of Education at the University of Pennsylvania. And some of you may know that UPenn is also largely, or likes to think that it's one of the homes of positive psychology. So this is a subdomain within the larger field of psychology that really focuses on all of the things that make life wonderful. So as opposed to thinking about pathology or illness, which is really important, positive psychology thinks about things like how can we thrive and flourish? What does it mean to be a generous person, a curious person? What are positive character traits, etc. So Martin Seligman, who's now a retired professor at Penn and largely considered the grandfather of positive psychology, came up with a particular theory of flourishing. It's commonly known as PERMA, and the newer version is PERMA-V, which is what you see on the slide here. So we use his theory as a way to conceptualize and define what we mean by thriving. Thriving gets a lot of airplay, which I think is important. Nationally and specifically within higher ed, we talk a lot about well-being and belonging and community building and student mental health. But we've also found that oftentimes people aren't defining what they actually mean by thriving. So our definition, we're drawing from Seligman, and PERMA-V is an acronym here, and it stands for the 6 components that he and his co-authors propose are necessary components of a flourishing life. We don't have to experience all of these things all the time, certainly, but these are things we can aspire to. So the P is positive emotion, and that includes things like happiness and joy, but it also includes other emotions like gratitude. Engagement here, really, the idea is closely linked to the experience of flow. So if you're really engaged in a task, for example, learning about something new as a student that's really exciting for you, you may find that you lose track of time in the library or looking at materials. That's a form of engagement. Relationships are, right? We're human beings and we're social animals. And Seligman and many others proposed that having supportive, pro-social, trusting, caring relationships is key to having a general sense of well-being. M here is meaning. Is there something in our lives, or maybe multiple things, that give us a sense of meaning and purpose beyond ourselves? Are we working on something that has meaning to our community, for example? The A for achievement gets a lot of attention, particularly in educational contexts, right? And there actually is a lot of evidence that as humans, we do need to have a sense of competence and confidence, and a sense that we've achieved our goals and we can accomplish things. We have some self-efficacy. And then the V here is vitality. So that's the idea that, yes, to feel a sense of well-being, we have to have mental and physical health as well, and be able to move in the world and experience health broadly defined. So that's a very brief overview of PERMA V. But again, I wanted to take a moment to share this with you because these are a lot of the founding principles that undergird the work that Kate and I and others are doing. And that very much informed the design of the course that we developed that I'll share. Any questions before I move on? Thoughts or questions about PERMA V?
And I did share a different little infographic that actually brings out some of those points that you were talking about. So instead of just saying meaning, but it has some of those other little tangentials that come off of that that
Oh,
might help.
wonderful.
Yeah.
Oh, great. That's fabulous. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, for
Thank you
sure.
for that. Yeah. And anything else about PERMA V before we move on? No? Okay. All right. So we have this sort of conceptualization of what thriving is. And I think a key takeaway is whatever model or definition you use, thriving is multidimensional, right? Well-being is multidimensional. It's not just about one aspect of your life. It's made up of multiple components. So if we have that in our minds, now I wanted to kind of transition into us thinking together about graduate student thriving, and what that might mean and why that might be particularly challenging for students. Why is it a quote unquote problem, perhaps? Um, so as you see on the slide, and this isn't a completely exhaustive list, but these are some of the key challenges that many graduate students face. Turns out there are a few learning supports for graduate students. So I come out of a Center for Teaching and Learning that had and continues to have a very robust 20+ year program to support undergraduate students with academic supports. But until I arrived on the scene to start a new program, there were no specific academic supports for graduate students. They were largely left to their own devices. And I think there was also an assumption that, oh, they're graduate students. They already know how to do this, right? Although this was never clearly defined. So it turns out that's true of a lot of institutions. Many supports, but they're usually targeted and designed for undergraduate students. They may be generalizable and helpful for grad students, but grad students often don't know that. And so there are these resources that might be available maybe, but they don't know about them. Or if they do know about them, they're targeted to undergrads, and grad students feel that perhaps they're second-class citizens. Bullet point number 2, probably not surprising to those of you in the audience, most faculty are not trained formally to teach or mentor or advise. This is particularly challenging in graduate education, even more so in doctoral education, because of the time to degree for students. So depending on what students are studying, they may be working very closely with a faculty mentor in an apprenticeship role for 5, 6, 7, 8+ years. And that faculty member, although an expert in their field and discipline, they may or may not have experience, expertise, or confidence in terms of their teaching or mentoring. And that relationship, particularly for doctoral students with their faculty advisor, we know there's a lot of evidence to show that it is a key predictor of whether that student finishes their program, how long it takes them to finish their program, how satisfied they are with their program, and their overall self-report of mental health. So that relationship with advisors is really essential. The third bullet point here is degree completion, especially for doctoral students, not good. It's hovering around 57% right now, and that's been the case for decades, despite a lot of attention and growing attention to the problem of why are people entering these programs and not necessarily finishing them. Imposter stress is very prevalent. A lot of graduate students report that they feel, did my institution make a mistake admitting me? Do I have what it takes? Am I, as prepared as my peers, etc. Even when the answer is yes, they are prepared and know their institutions did not make a mistake. And yes, they are supposed to be there. A lot of students don't feel that yet upon entry. Mental health challenges are pervasive among graduate students. In fact, mental health challenges like depression and anxiety, the prevalence rates are actually much higher among graduate students than they are among undergraduate students. That is beginning to trend in a more positive direction in the last year or two, but there's still a discrepancy between undergrads and grads. International students obviously have lots of strengths and amazing lived experiences. And particularly at this historical moment, things are very complicated in higher ed. And justifiably, a lot of international students are really concerned about visa status and travel and situations in their home countries, et cetera. Even prior to this current historical moment, international students deserve and often require tailored supports, whether they're English language learning supports or supports to just get a handle on how is higher ed in the US similar or different from my experiences in my home country. Next bullet point, grad students' needs, and hopefully this list clarifies this, are different. They're distinct from undergrad's needs. And I end the slide with the question, are there other things that you all have observed or experienced that you would add to this list of what are some potential challenges for graduate students to thrive? Anything else that we should mention here?
So I added familial support. You have to have,
Great.
and it's hard to get them to understand because they ask you all the time, how's school going? How's school going? How's school going? And you're like, I mean, it's going. I'm here.
Yep,
I'm
it's
alive.
going.
Yeah.
Yeah. No,
So
that's a
you
great example.
gotta
Thank
have,
you. Yeah. How many of us have been asked, so when are you going to be done? When are you going to be done? It's hard to answer that, right? Yes. So familial support is key. And also, if your family doesn't have experience in higher ed, perhaps you're a first gen student and or you're an international student and your family's experiences, are unique to your home country and culture, there's a lot of negotiating and explaining, and that can be taxing. Yeah. Oh, Amanda writes, I agree. Getting instructors to focus on student success, online learning best practices, and community building can be especially challenging. Yes. Yes. Thank you. Thank you for your thoughts. Okay. So we were going to do a little Mentimeter activity, but since we're such a small group, I'm going to skip Menti and we can just continue writing in the chat and or feel free to unmute yourselves. So let's see. I'll write the questions that were on Menti in the chat. But we wanted to pause here and ask two things. And again, I'll write them down in a moment. The first is, are there specific student supports that you'd like to share that you think are either novel or effective at your institution? If they're grad student specific supports, great. If you're at a different type of institution, they could be other student supports. So that's number one. And then number two, we'll get to this in a moment, are there gaps in terms of student support that you've observed in your home institutions or at work? Okay, so let me write these. So questions. And forgive me, I'm not a very good typist, even though I type all day. Questions. So supports and resources for students on your campuses. And 2, gaps. Anybody? Okay. All right.
I mean, I'll always throw
Go for
something
it.
in there. So, in my PhD group, there was a bunch of us that we realized that there was a lack of support for those of us that were in the writing phase, and it was just the writing and the writing and the writing, and come back and it's, somebody cut their wrists on it and bled before they gave it back to you, that kind of thing, because it was
Yeah.
just, but there was no support for helping you get through that phase. And so at my school, the University of South Alabama, we created an aphids group, which is all but PhD.
Uh-huh.
We were a group that held each other accountable for stopping the lit review, because you could just go and go and go, and there's one more and there's one more, and we just stop. And what we did was we kept we kept a couple of students that were the ones that had made it past that and would be graduating soon, and then those of us that had made it to the PhD journey, like the actual writing part, so that we met every other week, typically at a restaurant, because we knew that we needed to eat as well.
Uh-huh.
So it was just that moment of succor that we provided to each other.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Thank you for that. So you touched on community building, social supports, accountability, also when to stop, like when is good enough, because we can review more literature until doomsday. Thank you for that. Yeah, Glenna, did you want to add anything?
To build on what Rebecca said, um, I I'm one of the 50%, 40 some percent who, after so many years, still haven't finished my dissertation, and for many of the reasons I have to shift here using double screens and it's not working well. Um, and for many of the reasons that Rebecca said, I could go on. I mean, there are so many. Um, Lack of support from my advisor, who I wrote up there earlier. I felt like, and I'm not the only one who felt this way, others within, we didn't have a cohort program, but we tried to form our own in a way just for support. I wish we had done something closer along the lines of what you did, but really what we did is just commiserate. and I know I'm not the only one who feels this way, that there was a lot of doctoral hazing,
Mm-hmm.
and that was really frustrating. So rather than feeling, especially from my advisor, the encouragement and support to get through, I almost feel like she was obstructive in terms of paying attention, in terms of getting things back to me. At one point, I sat in a meeting with her with something I'd submitted to her, I don't know, a week or two earlier at least, and I she sat in the meeting and read it while I was there and kept referencing as though she knew um, the points that I was making, the details that I was saying within the lit review. And it's a topic that I know she knows nothing about. So that was really irritating to me, that she
Mm-hmm.
needed to somehow be an expert in that, because she has, I suppose, had to be the expert over anything that I could contribute.
Yeah.
Um, and it was really frustrating. Eventually, I just stopped working on it. Never got past the lit review. I really, really could have used some realistic support from
Mm-hmm.
faculty, whether it was my advisor or any other faculty in the program, because I should have chosen a topic beyond something I wanted desperately to learn about,
Mm.
but chosen something that is more directly in my field, because then I could have actually had a place to start instead of starting from nothing, no knowledge really at all. And it would have been really helpful to have some advisement along those lines
Mhm.
for the sake of getting done. One final comment, my partner wrote a dissertation on a topic on basically on doctoral student sense of belonging and degree completion, and using social media as a way of gathering data and then doing a sensory analysis.
Mhm.
And what the findings in that study were similar to my own experience, in that they had to rely on each other because they either had that sense of impostership and didn't feel comfortable not knowing what they didn't know, and
Mhm.
didn't feel like they had any support, particularly in the dissertation phase. And that was globally, that because she didn't keep it to only the United States. She was looking beyond, and that's basically what she learned. What made me laugh is she wrote that for the sake of our doctoral program.
Mhm.
And then suddenly there was some talk about some changes that they wanted to make, never acknowledging that some of their ideas came directly from our dissertation.
Yeah, right.
But
From this
yeah,
amazing student's work.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah. So,
But yeah, for me it was not a good experience, and I still have it hanging over my shoulders that I didn't finish, and I don't feel good about that at all.
thank you for sharing that. And um, what, as I mentioned before, but to your example, really shines a spotlight on this. That relationship with the advisor is so pivotal, and it really is the greatest predictor of outcomes for the student.
And
Um,
it was suggested, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, a few times that I change advisors, but I felt really inhibited to do that because this person really did have power and authority over me, and I
mhm.
didn't want to essentially piss her off.
Yeah, there's
And
that power
yeah,
differential and dynamic, right?
yep,
They're your
exactly.
mentor, but they're also your boss in a sense,
Yep.
especially if you're in a STEM field. And you likely rely on them to write letters of recommendation for you and to help launch your career wherever you end up after the program.
I was
Amen.
really too afraid to change, to even make the attempt to change advisors.
Yeah.
I did not think that would go well. Thank you.
Amanda placed in the chat. She says, I did my MA at CU Boulder through hybrid courses, and my program had a coordinator who would check in with us all in person at the beginning and at the end of each semester. She would also consistently check in via email and be available via Zoom for one on ones too. She would make sure we all had what we needed to be successful, and it was one of the most helpful things that the program did for us. We were all full-time K-12. Well, that takes a special person right there. We were all
Yes.
full-time K-12 teachers as well, so we needed this extra level of support. I
Yeah.
love K-12.
Yeah. And thank you for sharing that, Amanda. And that sounds like you had an excellent mentor and advisor who was really engaged in reaching out and creating touch points and being supportive holistically. Okay, so I'm going to start sharing my screen again. Now that we've raised some serious challenges and also potential ways that faculty and advisors can be of support to grad students and administrators, Kate and I wanted to share, this is a little conceptual model that we put together that is now sort of our solution, if you will, or our approach to graduate student support. And I apologize, the font is probably too small to see fully, but I can read it. So we think of it as these three intersecting kind of buckets, if you will. One is academic flourishing. And we say academic flourishing through lifelong skills for the present and future, like reading in grad school, you know, more reading than is humanly possible to complete in a week, note making, research, writing, and mentoring, right? There are these skills, including mentoring up, like how can you contribute to an effective working relationship with your faculty advisor? You know, there are these skills that we put in this bucket of academic flourishing that are often tacit, right? Part of the vast hidden curriculum of graduate education, right? Oh, you're in grad school. You must know, how to read efficiently and make notes. You must have a strategy for writing academic papers. Well, no, we argue that those are often assumptions, and students don't necessarily come in yet with those skills. Those are unfamiliar. And so we think it's really important to help make the pervasive hidden curriculum more visible so that students can navigate it and reach their goals academically. The second bucket here is the holistic well-being bucket. And that's through providing multidimensional supports grounded in positive psychology, which I mentioned earlier. And then the third bucket is community connection, which, you've all touched on in various ways. So by this, we mean community connection in online spaces within, for students within a particular cohort or program and institution, but also across institutions and disciplines. So we're not quite there yet, but our goal is to start to have students from different institutions engage with us in some of these courses so that they can learn about being a graduate student with and from other graduate students at other universities. So that's kind of the conceptual model. And in the interest of time, I'm going to just jump ahead to talk about our example course that I wanted to share. I just skipped over 2 slides, kind of giving some more background about how did we get to this point, largely piloting things at Princeton. And then this past summer through the fall, we created a first version of this course, Gateway to Graduate School. And we were able to pilot it with a couple of different universities. You see them here on the slide. Fordham, we have a master's version of the Gateway to Grad School course for new master's students. And we piloted that at Fordham and Georgetown. And then we have a different version for new doctoral students that we piloted with some students at Pace in New York and University of Washington out on the West Coast. The course itself it has asynchronous modules, and I'll share those with you in a moment, or at least the topics. But the key for us was we really thought it's going to be important to invite students to weekly meetings that are live and synchronous, particularly for that community building bucket. The course is workshop style, so the students are moving through the asynchronous modules on their own at their own pace, during times that are convenient for them. And then when we get together, we usually do an activity. We talk about the themes in the module and then do an activity together. And in terms of the sort of platforms we used, we started creating the initial course on Canvas, and then we created another version on a platform, or an LMS rather, called Eurekos, which is actually a Danish company that's been really wonderful to work with. And we use various tools in the course: Mentimeter, Padlet, idea boards, other Google tools, etc. So that's kind of a general background. And then here are the modules in the course. And these are the modules for the PhD specific course. Number 1, how do we use the course? And then the more detailed topics, a module on the student's path and goals, discussion and thinking and activities around process and progress in doctoral education, a brief introduction to some of the key topics related to learning and academics in graduate school, things like, how do I manage, that my syllabus says I'm supposed to read these 6 books in preparation for my seminar in a couple of days. So thinking about reading and different approaches to reading and making notes and preparation for quote unquote participation in coursework, for example. What are the different ways to participate? Are we limited to just speaking extemporaneously, while sitting around a seminar table? No, there are other ways that we can participate as well. Intro to Thriving in Grad School, and this module is all about that V and the PERMA-V model, vitality, and how do we set ourselves up for being a happy, healthy person in graduate school, and striking some sort of balance among the different components of our lives. You know, scholarship and being a student is just one of those dimensions. And number 6 here is the intro to relationships in graduate school, you know, with a big focus on that relationship with your faculty advisor or advisors, but also relationships with classmates, lab mates, cohort mates, and friends and family as well. And then we end the course with an activity that students have found really helpful, where we ask them to identify certain resources specifically for graduate students and or gaps therein on their home campuses, and then to sort of create an artifact that they can then share with their classmates and cohort mates on their campus to try to make some of that hidden curriculum more visible. Any questions about these topics before I move into a little example activity? Anybody? No? Okay. So in the 5th module, that Intro to Thriving in Grad School, we have the students do a variety of activities on their own, and then we do, as I said, an activity together. So I thought we would take a couple minutes and I would share with you one of the activities, and I encourage you to do the activity if you like. So we call it the Wheel of Grad School, and as you see, the learning goals are to help the newish grad students reflect on the many aspects of their lives, and then think about how might they be prioritizing these. And it's informed somewhat by the idea of design thinking, and the book, you know, Designing Your Life. So how can you sort of intentionally make choices about how you're prioritizing your time and utilizing your time? And then we end with articulating one action step. And I should also add, I forgot to mention that we envision this particular course, Gateway to Grad School, as a complement to institutions' own orientation programs and activities. So in one of our pilot cohorts, we did the course with them in the summer before they actually arrived on their new home campus. And then we did another version with students who had already matriculated and begun, and we did the course with them in their first semester as new students. And then in a third pilot, we did the course with second semester graduate students, trying to figure out, is there a sweet spot? And each iteration has pluses and challenges. But I think it's important to think about when would a course like this be most helpful? And could some of these ideas be threaded throughout a graduate program, for example, as opposed to all coming at the beginning? Okay, so here is what the Wheel of Life looks like. And if you Google Wheel of Life, you'll see these different versions, right? But the idea is it usually looks like a target. It has concentric circles. And then it's up to you, if you're filling out the wheel for yourself, to decide how many slices of the pie you would like, right? You could have 6 or 8 or 10 or 12, and then to label the slices of your pie. So this example, the slices were already labeled. I just pulled it off the internet. You see community, spirituality, health, career, finances, etc. And that's what the sort of the blank version looks like. And then on the right is an example of what it might look like after the person who's doing the Wheel of Life has filled it in. So the idea is, if you imagine, for example, you're looking at your, let's do friends slice here on the bottom. The concentric circles are meant to sort of be a gauge of your personal satisfaction level in that component at this moment in time. So if you start in the center, that would be 0. And then you see each concentric circle, you're going out 1, 2, 3, 4, right? So this person is saying, am I satisfied with my friends, my activities, or my relationships with my friends right now? And they're putting that at a 4. And then if you jump over to their satisfaction with their family life, that's higher. That's at a 6. And then with spouse or significant partner, they're at an 8. right? So again, no judgment. It's just a way for the individual to kind of assess, how am I feeling about the different domains of my life? So I'm going to pause there, and I wanted to share a link with you. This is to a Google Doc example of the Wheel of Life that we created specifically for the grad students in the course. And here's that Google Doc. And you'll see that we intentionally left the pie slices empty because we think it would be pretty presumptuous, to decide for someone else what the most important domains of their lives are. So in our pie, you see we have 8 slices, but students can create their own if they like. And what we generally do is, we'll sort of set up the activity as I've just done, and then we'll give people just a couple minutes, maybe 8 or 10 minutes, and we'll ask them to take a moment, turn your cameras off, think about this, and begin to complete your Wheel of Life. And it's okay if they don't finish it for now, but the idea is to get started. And then we come back and we invite students to reflect on the experience of thinking about the Wheel of Life. And oftentimes we'll hear people say, I've never done this. It was really interesting. It forced me to think about not just my life as a graduate student, but what else is going on, or wow, it really prompted me to think about how the different aspects of my life inform and sometimes complicate each other. So let's see. We generally come back with these types of questions, ask them to work on the wheel. Most people find that, gee, it doesn't look quite balanced. It's kind of jagged, as you saw on the example, and that's okay. The goal is not to have a completely balanced life, but the goal, at least in the activity, is to identify where are areas where I'm more satisfied and where are areas where I'm less satisfied. And to the bottom bullet point on the slide, is there one particular area or life domain where I'd actually like to improve my own self-satisfaction score, right? So that's really what we're getting toward, helping students to identify, is there an area that's actually not conducive to my overall well-being and thriving? If I can pinpoint something, then I can do the next step, which is thinking about, how might I make a change, right? Do I want to adopt or sort of work on a new habit formation or a behavior change? Do I want to allocate more time each week to make sure that I'm able to go to the gym, or to make sure that I can have a Zoom call with my family back at home, or that I can get home on time to, have dinner with my kids, whatever it might be. So I'll stop there. Any thoughts or questions about the Wheel of Life activity? Anyone ever seen anything like this before? Rebecca's raising, yeah. Yeah. Anybody else?
Do you walk through it with the students to help them to understand how to prioritize? Because a lot of times people haven't been taught how to do that. And so that's where we end up with folks that are overloaded cognitively and physically and emotionally. And so just asking.
Yes, definitely. I mean, that's one of the major reasons for the activity, right? To think about all of the different aspects of our complicated lives. And if you ask grad students, or really most of us, but I think especially grad students, as I like to do, what do you think, what's your relationship with time? How are you feeling about time? They'll often say, oh my gosh, it's so stressful. That's the most limited resource. I always have too much. I'm always behind. It's often time focused. So if after this activity, that often sort of that theme comes out, like, maybe I'm not as satisfied as I'd like to be in my friendship relationships because I feel like I don't have enough time to socialize, or be around friends outside of the classroom. Okay. what could I do about that? Are there ways that I could think about changing my calendar or using time blocking or practicing other tools so that I'm happier with my choices, and my choices about how I'm using my limited time are more in alignment with my priorities or values. Like, for example, me now as a postgraduate school, I really value sleep. And I valued it as a graduate student as well, and as an undergrad less so. I didn't need it as much, but like that's a key value for me. And if something is going to interfere with my sleep so that I'm not getting what I know I need, that's a problem. And I try to be intentional about addressing it. It's a small thing, but perhaps not so small.
And I'm gonna just remind you, we have about 9 minutes until the last presentation
Okay.
of the day. So if you,
Great, thank you. Okay, so without further ado, we then generally utilize Mentimeter again, and then ask people after completing the wheel of life, the wheel of grad school life, can they identify, is there a domain where they'd like to improve their satisfaction? And then depending on the size of the group, we do it on Menti or we might do it live verbally, have a conversation around, is there one small step you could take to start to bring about that change and to raise your satisfaction score in that domain? And then the last bullet point here is we invite participants to think about and then write down the name of a person who can act as an accountability partner, right? So it turns out there is empirical evidence to show that if you decide to do something and you write it down, you're more likely to do it. And also, if you decide to do something and you say it out loud, you tell someone, oh, I'm going to try this new thing where I go to the gym twice a week. If you tell someone and you actually have a trusting, supportive relationship with that person, it turns out it's much more likely that you're actually going to do the thing you said you would do. So the last sort of step of this particular activity is we, after the students identify a small change they'd like to experiment with, we ask them to write down the person that you're going to tell about this and then go tell them, right? And ask them to help you, recruit them to help you hold yourself accountable to actually doing this new thing. Okay. And then I guess, yeah, this is sort of the last slide here, content-wise, is we're still continuing to assess the pilots. We've had feedback and students are interested in, could they get some sort of a certification or credentialing or badges after this course and others. Not surprisingly, the grad students prefer the activities over anything that feels lecture-y, which is totally fine. They really like talking with each other in the synchronous meetings. And it turns out that the vast majority of students who've opted into our pilots are international and or neurodivergent students. So we think that in addition to supporting all new grad students, there are certain subpopulations of new grad students who are really feeling that they do need some extra support in terms of figuring out how to navigate an unfamiliar landscape. We have done some assessments where we've surveyed the participants, and we have seen, changes. Our sample size is small, but we do see trends going in the right direction in terms of improved feelings of connectedness for students after they participate in these online courses. Feeling that they're more prepared academically to meet the distinctive demands of graduate school, and more clarity personally around their own goals for why they've matriculated, why they've chosen this program, what they'd like to learn in the program, and where they'd like to go after the program. A challenge, you see at the bottom of the slide, the last bullet point is we need to be more persistent about actually getting participants to complete the assessments so that we can boost that sample size and their response rate. So I'll stop there in the interest of time, but I'm happy to engage in your questions and comments. Thank you. I'll stop sharing there for a second. Let's see. Oh, there we go. Any questions or comments? Here, let's see. I'll put the slides back up just as we're wrapping up. These are some quotes from some of the participants that we think are very telling.
Laura, I'd really like to thank you for your time today. I'd like to thank you for your expertise in bringing this very valuable conversation up for everybody to hear. And, you know, when it comes to graduate students, one of the things that I always encourage them to do is to always reach out, even if it's not their direct mentor. We're here for a reason, and we do what we do for a reason. And if you see somebody that is doing work that you like and you feel comfortable reaching out to them, you should reach out to them.
Mm-hmm. I absolutely agree. And I encourage you and others to reach out to Kate and me at GradTLC. This is what we are doing now. We're solely focused on supporting grad students. Yeah. So thank you so much for having us.
Thank you so much. I'm going to stop the recording.
Okay.